Good evening. This is Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo story. While the country and the media has been fixated with the Aryan Khan case, we have barely paused to debate whether a confident democracy should be applying an anti-terror law to a group of students who decided to cheer Pakistan instead of India during the recent face-off. That's what we'll be looking at on the program today. Let's bring you up to speed with the main developments of this story. 14 individuals have been booked for celebrating Pakistan's win in that dramatic, volatile face off, where Pakistan scored an easy win over India in the T20 face off. Now, remember, this isn't just being booked under any ordinary law. This is being booked under the anti terror law and being accused of sedition. It isn't just about students from Jammu and Kashmir. Action has also been taken against a school teacher in Rajasthan in a private school who basically posted a WhatsApp status suggesting that she was cheering for Pakistan instead of India. Mehbooba Mufti is among the J&K politicians who is raising this issue with the Prime Minister. But the police that has initiated action says that this was necessary to teach a lesson. In the meantime, it never is just cricket between India and Pakistan, and Virat Kohli is finally breaking his silence on the shameful trolling of Mohammad Shami, who was subjected to the most vicious religious bigotry online after that defeat. But the larger question remains, it's always high stakes between India and Pakistan. It's never just only cricket. But should we be jailing people for cheering the other side? That's what we're looking at on the program today. Let me introduce our guests. We are joined by veteran police officer SP Vaid. He's been former Director General of Police of Jammu and Kashmir. Namaskar, welcome to the program, sir. Sadanand Dhume, well-known journalist and columnist with the Wall Street Journal, just has an excellent piece out in the journal. Do please have a look at it. Very opposed to the use of this law. Ifra Jan, she is with the National Conference. Thank you, Ifra, for joining us today. Tehseen Poonawalla, otherwise a critic of the right wing, but has a recent column out in India Today saying he's not comfortable at all with the cheering of Pakistan, and it makes him acutely uncomfortable. He doesn't think democratic rights extend this far. Prasanna Karthik, who's a policy analyst leaning on the right of the spectrum, is with us as well. And Raja Muneeb, who's another columnist from Jammu and Kashmir, is with us as well. Mr. Vaid, I must start with you because while action has also, by the way, been taken in the Congress-governed state of Rajasthan, and this is something that is not about Congress BJP. In fact, the law that has been used against the 14 who cheered for Pakistan is a law that is a gift from the Congress time. What is the logic? I'm not, I don't think anyone is comfortable with the cheering of Pakistan, but what is the logic in applying this law, in applying the sedition law, which many people anyway believe is an archaic law that should go? What do you say, sir?
Barkha, while India-Pakistan match is always, very interesting, like UK and Australia matches, and we have been seeing this cheering and hooting not now for many years. I remember many years back this happening even when I was young SP. See, while appreciating any team or any good player, it's you cheer for the winning team or winning player, and the other team. Obviously, you will like to play down, but then in the context of Kashmir and in the context of Pakistan, things are little different, and it definitely, when such scenes are seen, it makes all of us uncomfortable. Why is it happening?
Yeah.
That too, medical students, 500 of them are selected out of 1.5 crore in the state. They are the privileged lot. They got everything from Indian state, the nation state. What is the reason that they are still hooting Indians team when
No,
they
it is.
lost?
I agree with you that it's uncomfortable. I agree with you that there's something very disturbing, in particularly about the fact that this is government subsidized education. But I want to ask you whether an anti-terror law should be applied. Is that the best way to deal with it, Mr. Vaid?
Yeah, Varka. very clearly, I absolutely do not agree on that. I think that is little too much. I think once you have gone for a registration of an FIR, I think Indian Penal Code is sufficient enough to take care of anybody if he or she has violated the law. Let
Yeah.
normal law take its course. But uh, uh, I think mere registration of case, once if it is proved and then challan in the court, it denies that student, a girl or a boy, the privilege of joining government job. I think that in itself is enough punishment, and I don't think UAP was required. That's my personal
But
view.
so you believe that the tough anti-terror law was not needed, but some criminal action was in order. Is that fair, Mr. Ved?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. The images we are seeing is of some of those students who have been charged being produced in court. When that happened, they were heckled and jeered. Let me come to Sadanand. But Sadanand, before I ask you to respond, I also want to argue this from the other side. For anyone saying it's only cricket, Pakistan has very clearly demonstrated that it's not only cricket for them. And that is manifest in its interior minister, a gentleman whom, as someone who covers Pakistan, I typically would not take seriously if he were not holding the post he does. And I'm talking, of course, about Sheikh Rashid, who says this after Pakistan wins. Okay, I think we're waiting for that statement. Is that coming up, guys? Okay, Sadanand, I think they're just stacking it up. So do you want to come in with your first comments? Can we unmute him, please?
So there are basically 2 points that I want to make. The first is that in a liberal democracy, we typically put up with a lot of things that make us uncomfortable. So obviously, in an ideal world, those Kashmiri students would be filled with love for the Republic of India and would all be in deep mourning after India lost that match. That was obviously not the case over here. Does that please me? No, it doesn't please me. But I think that one of the most basic ideas that you internalized if you in a democracy, or if you have a liberal democratic outlook, is that a lot of people say and do a lot of things that we don't like, but we do not allow the government or the state to go after them. So I'll give you a really good example. So let's just say during the height of the Cold War, you had people who were in the US cheering the Soviet Union. This would not have been approved of, right? Let's just say after the UK and Argentina fought a war over the Falklands, and after that you had the British fans cheering Diego Maradona, or Brits of Argentine origin, or anyone. This would not have been approved of, right? People would have been upset. I don't blame people for being upset. I don't blame you for being upset. I don't blame Mr. Vaid for being upset, or anybody else. What I question is the use of the law. I think that is unjust, and I think that is undemocratic. I think that is the kind of thing that we see in countries like China, in places like Russia. It is not the kind of action that a democratic state should take. That is my first point.
Okay.
The second point is
sorry, go ahead.
let me just quickly, because you raised Sheikh Rashid. The second point, and I think that this is where many Indian hyper-patriots play into Pakistan's hands, is that it is absolutely in Pakistan's interest to play up divisions within India. It's not a coincidence that Sheikh Rashid, who is widely seen as a puppet of the Pakistani military, put out that video. And it is also not a coincidence that many people on the Indian side, many of them happening to be BJP supporters, among others, took the bait and circulated that as further proof that Indian Muslims are not patriotic, and look, they're all cheering for Pakistan. First of all, that is nonsense. It is not true. Secondly, even if a handful were, right, even if let's you do have some who do, let's just take that as a factual statement. Is it in India's interest to deepen Muslim alienation by doing things that are manifestly
Can I jump in there?
I think it is against India's interest, And I think the Pakistanis understand that. And by going and doing these heavy-handed things, terrorism law, sedition law, and so on, you are in fact strengthening the Pakistani argument and weakening the Indian Republic. That is my
Okay.
argument.
Okay, there's the title of your piece. India seems determined to lose to Pakistan in more than cricket, Sadanand. And let me argue from the other side. You say, in a way, that this is playing to the Pakistan script. I could also argue that those who are cheering for Pakistan are playing to the right wing script, because this is how the right wing then jeers Muslims across India, asking them to prove their patriotism. This is how a Muhammad Shami gets singled out for the kind of obnoxious, awful commentary that he has. So this can be argued from both sides, can it not?
Of course, there's no question that they may be. But the point is, what do you care about? If you care about the integrity and the unity of India, and if you care about the well-being of India's 1.4 billion citizens, you should not play into the hands of your enemies. It's as simple as that.
Okay, we are ready now to remind our audience what Pakistan's Minister Sheikh Rashid said right after the win that Pakistan scored. Do listen in, and I'll come to you, Tehseen, right after that.
मैं आज सारी पाकिस्तान की कौम को इस फतेह अजीम पर मुबारकबाद पेश करता हूं और जिस जुर्रत, वलवले, तनतने, दबदबे और बहादुरी से पाकिस्तान की टीम ने अपने रवायती हरीफ को शिकस्त दी है, उसको मैं सलाम पेश करता हूं। और आज सारे आलमे इस्लाम में पाकिस्तान ने अपनी सलाहियतों का लोहा मनाया है। मुझे अफसोस है कि ये पहला हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान मैच है जो मैं कौमी जिम्मेदारियों की वजह से ग्राउंड में नहीं खेल सका, लेकिन मैं तमाम ट्रैफिक को इस्लामाबाद, रावलपिंडी हदायत की है कि कंटेनर हटा दिए जाएं ताकि कौम अपने जश्न को तारीखी तरीके से मनाए और पाकिस्तान की टीम को, पाकिस्तान की कौम को मुबारक हो। आज हमारा फाइनल था, हमारा फाइनल आज ही था और दुनिया के मुसलमान समेत हिंदुस्तान के मुसलमानों के उनके जज्बात पाकिस्तानी टीम के साथ थे। सारी आलम इस्लाम को फतेह मुबारक हो। पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद, इस्लाम जिंदाबाद।
Okay, before I go to Tehseen, Sadanand, just a very brief response from you. The problem is that, when he includes Indian Muslims in that comment, it actually makes one's blood boil. And that's when it gets very difficult to step back and be dispassionate and say, all right, so some kids raised a few slogans, ignore it.
Why are you allowing a Pakistani minister who is known to be a puppet of the Pakistani military to set your national narrative? Is that wise, or is that incredibly stupid? Obviously, your blood will boil, but it's sort of the sensible thing to do over here is to understand what he is doing there. And secondly, just because a Pakistani minister says this, it doesn't make it remotely true. Who are the people who claim that it is true in India? The people who claim that it becomes true because Sheikh Rashid is saying it are people who are not friends of India, in my view.
Okay. Tehseen, you wrote a piece arguing just the rank opposite from what Sadanand has argued. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me on the show, Barkha. And at the onset, I am anti-BJP. But I just want to make a couple of things clear. So let's, for a minute, step away from cricket and Pakistan. Hypothetically, let's assume I am watching the Olympics where Neeraj Chopra is in the javelin throw, and somebody who's a fellow Indian citizen is cheering, say, a Ukrainian or a Russian to defeat Neeraj Chopra. Now, I can understand if you're cheering. To celebrate Neeraj Chopra's defeat in an Olympics would hurt me, even if it's the Olympics. It's not as passionate as India-Pakistan. Now add to it the masala of Pakistan and the masala of cricket, and passions are going to run high. Does this mean UAPA should be put? No. Does this mean sedition should be put? Absolutely not. But I cannot understand, and this is where I digress from what Sadanand said. I would cheer a good Pakistani performance. Of course, I would be happy about it. I would congratulate them. If a Pakistani sports person performed outstandingly well, and I've been a fan of Waqar Younis, Wasim Akram, I would want to even
Virat Kohli went and hugged Mohammad Rizwan.
Absolutely. And Pooja Bhatt asked me that on Twitter. She said, but the Indian cricket team did congratulate the Pakistan team, and that is sportsmanship. You must congratulate them. The entire stadium at Chennai in that famous test match where Sachin scored that brilliant century and we lost by 12 runs, stood up and gave the Pakistani team a standing applause. That is sportsmanship. But did anybody in the Chennai stadium, did anybody in the Indian cricket team want India to lose? No. Celebrate India's defeat? No. Would I celebrate Neeraj Chopra's defeat? Absolutely not. Leave aside celebrating India's defeat to Pakistan, with whom I have a bad history. Now to the second part of this argument. The second part is, look, you may live in whatever, you may say that what happens when Australia, with Australia or another country. India does not share bad relationships with any of these other countries. They are not inflicting wounds on India, and you cannot look away from that. Pakistan continues to sponsor terror in India, and passions run high. And therefore, I argue the opposite of what Sadanand said.
What would be the appropriate response of the Indian state? I think I don't think anyone is here to debate whether we feel okay. Of course, we don't feel okay. We feel ranging from irritated to disgusted to disturbed to annoyed. What should be the response of the Indian state is really the subject of this discussion. Tehseen, briefly, Sadanand has a brief interjection, and then Ifra.
Before I come to what should be the Indian state's response, just one thing. Why can't I say the opposite of what Sadanand is saying? You are purposefully cheering Pakistan only to help the BJP win. Why can't I put it that way? Because you know that there are elections coming up, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, and you're trying to make this a political issue. Why are you doing it? And I don't want to make this political, but I can argue this any which way. What should the Indian state do? They should definitely have been some sort of a warning to them. Maybe they do not qualify for a government job for 2 years or 3 years, but UAPA and sedition, absolutely not. Because by definition, the words in the sedition law is spreading disaffection against the government of India, which this is not. But there must definitely be consequences.
Okay, so you and SP Vaid are actually on the same side of this, that there should be some action, just not the action that has been taken. Sadanand is, I think, leaning towards no legal intervention for deciding which sporting team you choose. Sadanand, you had a brief response, then Ifra Jan.
Let me just quickly stick with, Tehseen's image. Tehseen, let's just say you and I are sitting next to each other on a couch and you're cheering Neeraj Chopra, and hypothetically that I'm cheering the Ukrainian, okay? I'm perfectly fine with you thinking I'm a terrible person, never wanting to speak with me again, writing an op-ed against me, tweeting, all of that is fine. When you start saying that the government should take action against me because I cheered for the Ukrainian, I believe that is an anti-democratic and undemocratic way of looking at disagreement.
Okay. Ifra, I do want to go back to SP Vaid, but here's what I would say to you. When a group of Kashmiri students cheer for Pakistan, it isn't quite as simple as let's take bets, aaj mera team ye hai, aaj mera team ye hai. It is at its root a political statement. That's how I see it. I don't see it as just picking lots, on which sporting team to bat. To that extent, it's designed to possibly mock or jeer the Indian state more than it's designed to celebrate Pakistan. In fact, I remember on a reporting trip to Kashmir, a Kashmiri told me कि ये जो हम पाकिस्तान के फेवर में slogans उठाते हैं ना, ये बस Indians को irritate करने के लिए करते हैं. हमें कोई पाकिस्तान से खास लगाव नहीं है. I've heard this so often in Kashmir. Mr. Vaid, you are nodding along because as a veteran police officer, you're aware of this. Now, my question is, when you set out to mock the Indian state, surely you know that the Indian state will respond in some way. Maybe not in this way, but it will respond in some way.
Barkha, I think I would agree with Sadanand when he says that obviously it's perfectly okay to see the cheering the way you want to. You probably are okay in agree. When you say that this is not just this is not just students supporting the cricket team. Even if we agree with you for a second, the question is, even if it hurts the Indian state doesn't like it, should it be a crime? Can the Indian state come in and arrest a person for doing something which is not a crime? I mean, if you look at the sedition law, the Supreme Court in the Balwant Singh case has clearly come forth and said, listen, cheering, saying Khalistan Zindabad, making slogans does not qualify as sedition. In the UAPA cases also, if you look at the section 13 which has been applied, again, it's not really a crime to celebrate Pakistan. So the question is it okay for the state to just arrest you for not really committing a crime? That
Can I
essentially
ask
tells
you?
you.
Can
Mhm,
I ask you
mhm.
as a Kashmiri, as a young Kashmiri, why do you think these young students, and a lot has been said about them being in, a state subsidized educational institute, why were they doing this, according to you?
Uh, I would say, Barkha, that when most of you, everybody on the panel, when you think about nationalism, a lot of it, you believe that it comes naturally to you. But it does not come naturally to anybody. It's something you learn in the environment you grow up in. And Kashmiris as students have not grown up in the environment that most of you have, right? So we have grown up in bullets. Most of us have survived attacks. Most of us have lived where it was never an ideal world, where the kind of picture that you have of the state, a benevolent state, a nice state that protects us, also comes from the certain kind of, may I say, majoritarian privilege that many of you have. It was not necessarily the kind of picture we grew up in. And that's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why not many people in Kashmir feel nationalistic. And
Okay.
to be honest, this is something that these students should be asked. Why do you not feel like the way we feel like, right? You
Hmm.
don't really come in and say, let's arrest all of you. If you do that, then in a certain way, aren't you really proving their point correct? Aren't you proving them
I mean,
right?
I think that's the point that Sadanand has made. But Mr. Vaid, sorry, Raja and Prasanna, give me half a second with Mr. Vaid. I have a feeling also that people in uniform, especially the J&K police, who is caught between a rock and a hard place, often condemned by their own community, amongst, if not the bravest police force in the country, might feel something very different when you see the images that we saw in this video.
Yes, Barkha. Just before I answer that, I would like to mention I completely agree with Ifra on the Kashmiri psyche, which this youth of last 25, 30 years, uh, the environment they have grown.
Hmm.
This is the psyche. Absolutely, she's put it right, and that's why I was mentioning. Can we go into the reasons why this is happening? That too from the elite of the society who got all the privileges from this nation state. Why are
Hmm.
they doing? Dr. Farooq Abdullah said it is to irritate BJP. BJP is not India. So BJP is a ruling party. I understand in the center, but it is not India. India is much larger than any particular uh,
Yeah.
political entity. Uh, Police obviously is, you rightly put, J&K police has very difficult job at hand, and they understand the psyche also. But then in the environment they are working. But I just want to mention before you move to other panelists one very important point, that whenever India Pakistan match is coming, the ISPR and the particular cell in the ISI gets activated.
Yeah.
They would do anything to create fissures between the different communities. Even you see the campaign against Mr. Sami. Uh, this some of them had origin from ISI headquarters, and uh, while I understand Indian netizens have not been very sportive. They
Yeah.
do all bullshit and other things, but definitely some portion of it did come from across. So we must keep that in mind, that things do have a background in
Okay.
Pakistan ISPR.
Fair enough, fair enough. Though I think, as you said, in a very sort of accurate way, even if some of that trolling of Mohammed Shami came from across the border through bots and otherwise, there is enough toxic commentary that goes on from trolls on Twitter, and we've all been at the receiving end of it, and so was Mohammed Shami. And I'm glad that Virat Kohli has finally condemned it today with the statement, "Our brotherhood cannot be broken," and that's a powerful statement, and I think we should take note of it in the larger context of what we're talking about today. Prasanna, go ahead.
Barkha, to begin with, I would like to say this, that the students who've raised this pro-Pakistani slogans and who've also been, charged by under various laws, they don't represent the bulk of Kashmiri students, right? It's just a very small percentage. There are thousands of Kashmiri students who are spread across the country, and many of them actually support India. And when it comes to sports or even any other engagement between India and Pakistan. So these people do not represent the students of Kashmir. They don't represent the mainstream sentiments in Kashmir, and we need to be cognizant of that. It's a small percentage, and it has to be dealt in a certain manner. Now, coming to the law. Now, most of the laws that have been used to charge these people are not anti-terror laws. They are, sedition laws, and there is a difference. And if you look at the sedition law, which started in the year 1960, and subsequently the first amendment to the sedition law was in the year 1951 or 53. I may be wrong here, but this was under Pandit Nehru, who himself was critical of the law. But when the first amendment was being made, he did mention that any activity that challenges friendly relationship with a foreign state or public order. It was Pandit Nehru under whose regime that the word public order was inserted into the sedition law. So anything that challenges public order is considered an act of sedition. Now, we may agree, disagree with the law.
I mean, the Supreme Court has since clarified that without an incitement to violence, it does not qualify as sedition. So even on a point of law, this particular application is weak. But that's a separate legal technical debate. I think what we're here to talk about is philosophically, how hard does the Indian state, or should it, come down on scenes of the kind we saw after this match?
But the thing is, when the police act in on a day-to-day basis, they don't act based on philosophy, they act based on law. Now, if we have a problem with the law, let us challenge the law. This law has not been challenged at all. Even when the JNU incident and all that happened, people who are critical of what the government did never try to amend the law. So long as the law exists, there are going to be consequences. So we need to take a philosophical position in terms of how, as a nation, we deal with sedition. We can't say that there will be a law and we will criticize the police or any government for the matter.
So what do you think? You haven't told me what you think.
I think the law has to undergo a change, and this is something that needs to bring political parties together. The fact of the matter is, every political party in power has actually used this law to their advantage. And
fair enough. But do you think these students should have faced some legal action?
It's certainly some legal action, definitely not something that, at the end of the day, the legal action has to be in such a manner that it kind of reforms them, and it also doesn't push a lot of other people who are on fence on the wrong side.
So the only person on this show so far who thinks there should be no legal action at all is Sadanand. Raja Muneeb, you are a Kashmiri who actually believes that the law can and should apply. Why do you think that?
See, Barkha, if you look at where the FIRs have happened, there are 13 FIRs. Now, the celebration or praising of Pakistan happened much, a lot of people were involved in that, but only 13 people have been booked. And if you read the FIR, it's not for praising the Pakistani team. It's basically for raising anti-India, slogans while praising the Pakistani team, and that amounts to sedition. Now, as Ifra rightly said, that we are a generation who has grown up in bullets. But let me remind you, this is not a generation problem. This is a generational problem. If you remember the 1986 cricket match which happened in Kashmir, a majority of the people actually went and cheered for West Indies and booed India out. So this has been a generational behavior where the anti-India hate is very high. And as Ifra said, that you need to teach nationalism. So I think that is where the state is now starting up, trying to teach people nationalism by saying you need to behave correctly. It's okay to praise a country.
What will happen?
I myself congratulated the Pakistani team on Twitter. See, UAPA, if you look at the Supreme Court new ruling that they said there has to be an intent of violence, there was no intent of violence here. So I think that is a bit harsh. But then I think it's more to use, it's been used more to send out a very strong message telling people it's not okay to be anti-India. So what has happened is, there have been a lot of anti-India sloganeering which has happened. If you look at the videos, the complete videos, and that is where the problem lies. The problem is not praising a team for the victory. The problem is, raising slogans against your own country, and that is where the problem is. So I completely agree with Tehseen. Unlike what we saw in Argentina and UK war, they don't have a problem of terrorism, but we know Pakistan has been perpetrating terrorism in Kashmir for last 30 years. So it's a constant problem. If you saw the trolling of Shami, Mr. Vaid rightly pointed out that it started from Pakistani IW accounts. Now, we see all the hate which came to Shami,
I mean,
but there were a lot of people.
Raja, we don't know that.
There were a lot of
no,
people.
I just want to say on Shami, I know it has been suggested that this is a Pakistan project.
The first 12 tweets came from, I can tell you with surety, the first 12 tweets, if you go through them, the first 12 tweets
I'm not a digital detective. I'm not a digital
I
detective,
did,
so I don't know. But I've seen enough rubbish. You're saying no Indian left and anti-Muslim comment on
No. I'm
Instagram
not saying that.
page?
I'm saying what happened is first 12 tweets came from the Pakistani IW. It was followed by a huge hate campaign in India. But there were a lot of people who stood for Shami as well. Let's acknowledge them as well. Why are we, discounting them out? There are a lot of tweets which came in favor of Shami as well.
I agree, right? But unfortunately,
so I'm saying,
Sorry, can I just make a point?
Sure. Please go ahead.
I just want to make a point that you can never remove the larger environment. And I think that's the point that Ifra made from a conversation like this. And to see mainstream channel after mainstream TV channel actually look at what had happened with Mohammed Shami as some sort of, to say that, those who are saying that is speaking up for Shami at this point are playing into the Pakistani script and therefore anti-national, I think speaks to, the larger toxic environment today where you can't speak up for an Indian Muslim without being accused of taking up for Pakistan. And there is a problem with that, Raja. There is a problem with that. I'm not saying I'm comfortable looking at these Kashmiri students, but I'm very uncomfortable that if we say Virat Kohli, please speak for Mohammed Shami, we should be accused of playing into the Pakistan narrative.
I never said that. I'm not saying.
No, I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying that's what was said on television channels.
You're absolutely right, and that is something which we have to look at collectively and consciously. That are we playing into that narrative? We should not be playing into their narrative.
Okay.
And we should not be getting into that. But I'm just saying that, that is how it's perpetrated and that is the reaction which is coming from the ground, and we have to measure both.
I think we have to stop. Sure, but I think we have to stop benchmarking ourselves against Pakistan. We are not Pakistan. Sadanand, okay, I'm seeing lots of fans. Okay, Prasanna first, then Sadanand, then Prasanna first, then Sadanand, then Ifra. Okay. Yeah, sorry, Raja, I'll come back to you. Prasanna's wanting an intervention there. Prasanna, go ahead.
Barkha, I think we have a tendency to kind of focus on the one small anomaly and, ignore the larger picture. While Mohammed Shami has been criticized, let me also tell you, even Virat Kohli was criticized.
Not in the same language. Not in the same language.
But the fact of the matter is, you will always find someone, using abusive language. That doesn't seem that does not mean that represents the mainstream sentiment. And the mainstream sentiment has always been supportive of people like Mohammad Azharuddin or Mohammad Kaif or Mohammad Shami. And for most of Indians who watch and who appreciate cricket, it really doesn't matter, which faith they belong to. So you will always have miscreants, and that does not mean that the actions of those miscreants are amplified to make that look as the same, which is not the case.
Okay, Sadanand, go ahead.
The first is that, okay, two quick points. The first is that, of course, there may have been some, ISI involvement with bots and all of that. But the notion that there is not a vast cottage industry on Indian social media that is constantly pumping out hatred towards Indian Muslims is risible. Just go under the comment section of any Indian Muslim journalist or anybody who sort of goes against the dominant narrative. And immediately the arguments are not about arguments, right? It's about, this is what your faith is and stuff. So let's be frank. I've mentioned this in my Wall Street Journal column. Since 2014, a very vast infrastructure on social media, propaganda sites, fake news sites, television channels, and so on has been set up. And what they do day in and day out is vilify Indian Muslims. It's a very domestic issue. I personally think it plays into the ISI's hands, as we can see from this incident. But this is a larger problem, which is that you have a people of a certain political persuasion who have not made the mental and emotional transition from being constantly on the outside, sniping at what India's secularism was, to being the ruling party responsible for the benefit for the well-being of all Indians. That's my first point. But the second point to Raja, very quickly, this notion that nationalism can be inculcated by using harsh laws, I think it's preposterous. It's a little bit like saying that you can force a woman to love you by putting a gun to her head. Nations must win the affections of people. They win the affections of people by being just. They don't win the affections of people by threatening. And so the notion that the Kashmiri people can somehow be reformed, and they'll be sort of like, they'll all start liking India better if they all fear that there's some guy with a big stick lurking behind the door. Unfortunately, that's just not how these things work. It's not how they work anywhere in the world.
But Sadanand, I want you to think about something, and I'll come back to it. Even in the United States, where you are right now, a great liberal democracy with the First Amendment that safeguards free speech, the one thing you rarely see is a kind of diversion from a broad consensus on the value of the vets, on how people feel about their military, about how people feel about people in uniform. And it's often been pointed out here in India that the one thing the left really gets wrong is its politics and nationalism. So I want you to just think about that. Tehseen, go ahead. And sorry, Ifra, I'll come to you right after that. Tehseen, go ahead.
Yeah, so first, I just want to make 2 or 3 points. First, I want to counter Sadanand on something he said. Everyone on this panel agrees that there shouldn't be sedition or UAPA. So we're not talking about sedition or UAPA. I'm not even asking for the state to come in and arrest you. What I'm asking for a government to do is, it is a democracy. It is your free choice to celebrate who you want. But similarly, in a democracy, it is then my choice not to hire you. I'm not saying put somebody behind bars. I am saying the
You're talking about the teacher. You're talking about the teacher, for example, who was, in fact,
which is not a Kashmir issue. Now, this is a teacher in Rajasthan putting up this kind of a status. So I'm saying she's free to celebrate who she wants. It's a democracy. But in a democracy, I'm free not to hire you then. Because I cannot understand. I can understand you appreciate Pakistan playing well. I can understand you even are fans of Pakistani players. I am. But I cannot understand how you can celebrate my defeat in my country. It is not acceptable. And even in USA, please allow me to finish, Barkha, even in USA, and I've been a number of times, there is a phrase used very often in the USA, love it or leave it. I am not saying that the US state comes down heavily on people. I'm not saying that. But this phrase, love it or leave it, is extremely popular in the US. You've been to the US. Now, let's also understand one more thing.
Can you hold on? Can you hold on for a second? Can you hold on for a second? For our audience who doesn't know what we're talking about. We're talking about a teacher who teaches at a private school in Rajasthan, who loses her job after her WhatsApp status says, "We won." And a parent on the school group then asks her, "Oh, were you backing Pakistan in this match?" And she says, "Yes." Now, she has released a statement saying that her status was a light-hearted update. I just want to play out what she has said, and then I think the panel can respond. So can we come out of this and play out what this teacher, who's now lost her job, said as action was taken against her?
उन्होंने कहा कि आप पाकिस्तान को सपोर्ट कर रहे हो, तो हंसी मजाक का ही मूड चल रहा था, तो मैंने, और उन्होंने अपने मैसेज के आगे इमोजी डाले थे, तो मुझे लगा ये हंसी मजाक का मैसेज है, तो मैंने उनको यस कर दिया। पर इसका मतलब कहीं भी नहीं है कि मैं पाकिस्तान को सपोर्ट करती हूँ। मैं इंडियन हूँ, आई लव इंडिया, और मैं इंडिया से उतना ही प्यार करती हूँ जितना आप सभी लोग प्यार करते हैं। तो यहाँ मेरा ऐसा कोई मतलब नहीं था। और अगर आप किसी को भी ऐसा लगा हो, जो मैंने भी एहसास किया कि वो एक्चुअली गलत हो गया है, तो जैसे ही मैंने एहसास हुआ कि मैंने गलती कर ली है, तो मैंने रातों रात ही मैसेज वो स्टेटस डिलीट कर दिया, क्योंकि मुझे ऐसा लगा कि हाँ एक्चुअली शायद ये गलत वे में जा रहा है। तो मैंने उस स्टेटस को डिलीट कर दिया, और मैं आप सभी से माफी मांगना चाहती हूँ कि ऐसा मेरा कोई मतलब नहीं था, और किसी को ठेस पहुंची हो उसके लिए आई एम वेरी सॉरी।
Okay, Tehseen, you want to complete your point in the light of what she said?
Yeah, look, I completely empathize with her. I completely
I don't know. I think
empathize.
Tehseen is frozen.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Barkha? Okay, I think Barkha, I think we've lost Barkha. So, no, I'll just take over. I completely empathize with her. I completely sympathize with her. And I understand what she did was not intentional. But please understand, when you're living in a situation where there is polarization, you need to be aware of not being the person who creates polarization. Sadanand, I also want to make one point. Sometimes police have to interfere, and I'll leave this to Vaid to say, not because they want to come down heavily, but they want to prevent further law and order from getting spoiled. It is sometimes a status that is used, a Facebook post that is used to create trouble by mischief makers from both sides of the communities. And sometimes police seem to be taking an action, even they know the sedition case won't hold up, but they need to take that action to prevent further loss of life, rights, damage. It is not the ideal situation, but we are
So
not living in an ideal situation.
do you feel this lady should have lost her job, Tehseen?
I feel she should have been suspended for a few months and then she could get her job back. But there has to be, but you have to be alert. If you ask me, would I be comfortable employing somebody who's going to publicly celebrate Pakistan? No, I am sorry. I am not comfortable with that. Would I be okay if somebody's a fan of Pakistani team or cheering? Yes, there's a difference between cheering, being a sportsman, and celebrating publicly in India. That's unacceptable to me, and I'm sorry if that makes me sound
Sadanand. Okay, Sadanand, I know you have your hand up, but Ifra's been waiting for a long time. Yeah,
I think we're missing a very sort of basic distinction over here, which is the difference between what private organizations have a right to do and what the government should be involved in. So, like, if you're running a firm and you think that that person, because of that particular set of views, is someone who is not does not belong in your firm, does not subscribe to the values of your firm, and so on. As a private employer, actually, I would back you. I would not, if I was running a firm, I would not sack her. But if you decided to sack her, I'd say, well, this is Tehseen's company, and he wants to apply those benchmarks. That's up to him. Similarly, Barkha or anybody else. My point is that when the government is involved, it's different, and the reason for that is very clear. The very basis of democracy is that you must guard against potential tyranny by those who have the most power.
Okay.
The state has more power, so you must be more careful. You must have guardrails. You can't be casual about, I asked the cops to do this.
But it could be argued that Rajasthan is different from Jammu and Kashmir, where the state is actually often under siege from terrorism, and therefore the context changes. But I'm just putting the argument out there. Ifra, go ahead. Go ahead, Ifra.
There are three quick points I'm going to make. There are three quick points I would want to make, Barkha. Number one, when we talk about the 4 Kashmiri students who've been arrested in Agra, the college itself has come forth and said, listen, these students did not make any slogans. There was just a WhatsApp status. And the college is supporting these students. Instead, it's the 4 BJP workers who've gone and who are pressing the charges of sedition. So there were no slogans, just a WhatsApp status. And why is it happening? Because at the end of the day, a point we are missing is that there is a huge electoral market for this kind of state harassment of Muslims in largely a context where Muslims as a community in popular discourse are criminalized, something that Sadanand pointed out, So there is an electoral market for it. That is for one. The second point I would want to make is that, everybody here is saying, okay, the action is a little too harsh, but it should have been a little less harsh. This is a dangerous argument. What you're saying is that you get to decide who goes to jail based on what you feel like. That is not how rule of law works. Rule of law works when you come and say, listen, if a person has committed a crime, irrespective of what anybody thinks, that person should go to jail. And here, no rule has been broken. This, in the long run, Barkha, puts all of us in danger. What it basically means is the state can arrest you, and it can actually in India, and when it wants you in jail.
I just want to correct you on one thing. There is at least one video where the slogans are audible. There is at least one video which you would have also seen in which the slogans are audible. You're
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So when you say there are no slogans, that's actually not true. There are slogans.
No, when I say there are no slogans, I mean, this is in the context of 4 Kashmiri students arrested in Agra. When it comes to the slogans, the video that is circulating, that is the GMC video in Srinagar.
That's right.
So in that GMC video, Srinagar, again, in the GMC video of Srinagar, so the problem again is it's been clearly and categorically pointed out. It's been clearly and categorically pointed out by the Supreme Court that raising slogans, seditious slogans, what you may think of sedition slogans, is not a crime. So if the state can arrest you for not committing a crime, that essentially means that the state can arrest any of us, and our judiciary is not really working.
Ifra, I need to go to that. Ifra, I have to ask you something. We're seeing that video in the medical college in Jammu and Kashmir where those slogans were raised. You're talking about 2 different episodes. There's Agra, where you say there was no video, and then there's the medical college where the slogans are clearly audible. I'm just choosing not to air them because I'm not comfortable airing them. But you've seen the video. We've all seen the video. Now, what is the appropriate action according to you for these slogans? Nothing. Look the other way. What would you say?
You see, I would say that, the state cannot and should not step in, because this is not a crime. The state only steps in when it is a crime. Raja pointed out one last point. Raja pointed out, said that Ifra said that we should teach nationalism, and that's what we're doing. We're teaching nationalism to Kashmiris. That's what the government's been doing. And I would say that, we Kashmiris are not a project, really. It's not a project or where you infantilize an entire community and say, let's teach them.
Okay, I have to start closing down. Raja, I want your comment. For some reason, you're plunged in darkness, but we can hear you, we hope. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have electricity here. I never said that, we need to teach nationalism. It was you, Ifra, who said that it doesn't come naturally to you. So I was responding on your saying on what you said. Second thing is, Sadanand, when you say that should the state put the gun on their head and, make them look other way. No, I never said that. But please understand what this does. This narrative building of Pakistan in Kashmir is where terrorism starts. This is where, it starts at the top with the snow glaring. At the bottom in the ground, a person picks up the gun and any mainstream or anybody who believes in an idea of India is shot. So you have to understand the consequences of these slogans, what they lead to in Kashmir. And that is why state behaves the way they behave in Kashmir, right? It has not happened in Agra because we know it is not going to happen in Agra. But in Kashmir, the dynamics are completely different. So these are the 2 quick points I wanted to make, Barkha.
And actually, I want to pick up on that and go to Mr. Vaid, and this is the beginning of last comments now, that there are in Kashmir entire sort of militant movements that can be run on the back of social media. And the one example, I'm not comparing slogans with it, I'm not literalizing, but I'm just reminded of the Burhan Wani phase where Facebook and other social media platforms, Mr. Vaid, were used in a very insidious manner. And it was actually an anti-terror, literally an information war. Go ahead, Mr. Vaid.
Yes, Barkha. In fact, I had to face all that immediately after Mr. Burhan Wani, the episode. It suits ISI to divide India on religious grounds. While if we, my personal view is, if anybody plays to these ISI trying to divide India on the community basis, he will be biggest fool in the country. And the more Muslims live in India, it's not about religion than in Pakistan. We have Muslims in our, Mr. Shami was player. So it is not religious, absolutely not. That point should be very, very clear. And the way social media is used in Kashmir to radicalize our youth in Kashmir, you have seen this happening post Burhan Wani, the effects it had, and it as Muneeb put it, it rightly starts with sloganing against in nation state of India, and then ultimately ends up picking up gun, and then you have seen what is happening in the valley. So it has consequences, and I think some kind of deterrent action need to be taken to check this so that it doesn't spread to other areas.
Prasanna, the point is this deterrent action effective? If what you want is for the next time these slogans not to be raised, is this the way to stop it?
Barkha, there is no one way to stop it. There are multiple ways of stopping it, and this certainly stops certain section of that misguided group from raising slogans the next time. But there are obviously other ways in which you kind of mainstream a lot of these people into thinking like most of us. So there is no one way to stop it. And if you ask me, is this the way? This is probably one of the ways. And obviously there is a certain amount of overreach here. But that I would again go back to the argument that as a nation, I think we need to relook at the sedition laws itself and not just about implementation. Because if you have a law, it will be implemented. But just a few quick points. In 2017 there was this lady by name Julie Briskman in the US, who actually showed her middle finger when Donald Trump's convoy was just passing by, and she lost her job. And when that happened, trust me, a lot of the the left liberal media in the US actually said that she deserves. I mean, she kind of the whole argument in favor of freedom of expression is not something that was made at that point in time. So I think there is an element of choosing very selectively going on here. The fact of the matter is that it's a private institution. What happened in Alwar, Rajasthan, it's a private institution, and the private institution is free to decide what it wants to do.
Okay, I've got to close.
One closing point, Barkha. I think we also need to stop looking at this from a religious prism. At the end of the day, there is a law. The law doesn't discriminate between faiths, and we also need to stop looking at it from the religious prism.
Well, I
kind of take objection to Sadanand's article, where in which he had actually said that Muslims have been arrested. It is not a case of Muslims have been arrested, and I think if you had a bunch of Hindus who also raise anti-India slogans, they also would have been arrested. So there is a law and there is a problem, and I think we need to kind of look at it in a very nuanced way, and there is no one way of just looking at this.
So that's an interesting point for Sadanand to respond to. Tehseen, Sadanand, you both have last comments to make. I'll just add a data point there. While researching the Aryan Khan story, government data does tell you that a disproportionately high number of under trials are Muslims, Dalits, or tribals. So like everywhere in the world, you'll probably, if you broke it down by race in America, you'd probably find something very, very similar. This is not particular to India. Socioeconomic indices do coincide with who spends how much time in jail. Just leaving that there. Tehseen, Sadanand, very quickly, got to close with both of you. Tehseen, you go first.
So quickly, I think the police themselves know that sedition will not hold up. Like I've been saying, the process is the punishment. So they have to find out a novel way of trying to prevent people from raising these kind of slogans. But I think, like I said in my earlier point, the police are forced to act because this could lead to communal tensions and lead to further riots. Now, why only Pakistan and why not with Sri Lanka or any other countries? Because we share a history with Pakistan that continues to be a history that they continue to torment us. Therefore, it gets emotions running. Pakistan, you may say, okay, but we had a bad history with England, but Pakistan continues to kill people in India. It continues to sponsor terrorism, and therefore it upsets people and it disturbs local law and order. Am I in favor of jail? No. Sedition? No. But should there be consequences? Yes. If that is not getting a job and that is a deterrent, there must be some deterrent to prevent this from going further. But should there be jail and sedition? Absolutely no.
Sadanand, last word to you.
I think the beauty of liberal democracy is that it's a means of managing diversity. And one of the nicest things about it is that someone somewhere is always upset. The fact that people were upset by the students chanting slogans is not a problem. That is perfectly normal and perfectly justifiable. The issue I'm raising is that wise countries, wise states know when to use the law, when to step in, and when to leave things be. I would say that the larger question over here was what plays into the narrative of those people who wish India harm. I think that the way the Indian state has gone about this in sort of charging people with terrorism and sedition and so on plays entirely into the hands of people who wish India ill. If India wants to, if it cares about doing better than Pakistan, what it should do is strengthen its own liberal democracy. That's the one thing that the Pakistani military in particular cannot stand. And anything that weakens Indian pluralism and weakens Indian democracy is a gift to Sheikh Rashid and the ISI.
Okay, we leave it there. Sadanand, Dhume, Prasanna, Karthik, Tehseen, SP Vaid, and to Ifra and Raja Muneeb. One we lost to electricity and electricity cut. I don't know where Ifra went, but thank you, Ifra. And to our audience, have a great weekend, and we'll see you now on Monday. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.